All right, you ready? Today I've got some creepy Reddit confession threads that honestly creeped me out. If you enjoy it, hit subscribe and leave a like. Here we go. My therapist, 58-year-old female, has started using phrases that only my dead mother ever said to me, 27-year-old female. This one was posted on r/offmychest about 3 days ago by a user called Quiet Glass Zero. And right from the opening line, you can tell this person is not looking for attention. She is genuinely shaken. I lost my mom 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in April, gone by September. I started seeing my therapist about a year after that because I was not functioning. Not sleeping, not eating right, just floating through everything on autopilot. And honestly, therapy helped. My therapist, 58-year-old female, was warm and patient, and she never rushed me through the hard stuff. I trusted this woman more than almost anyone in my life. But over the past few sessions, something started to shift. She began saying things that felt too familiar. Not normal therapy language, specific phrases, things that sounded exactly like my mother. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was projecting grief onto her words. Then, last Thursday, we were working through some childhood memories and she leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, "You were always my brave little cardinal." I could not move. I could not breathe. My mother whispered that exact phrase to me in hospice while holding my hand in her final hours. I have never spoken those words out loud to anyone. Not my husband, not in a journal, not to a single living soul. The session ended and I sat in the parking lot shaking for 40 minutes. That phrase, "my brave little cardinal," is not something you stumble into. That is not a lucky guess or a coincidence. That is a private deathbed moment between a mother and her daughter. And somehow this therapist said it like it was nothing. OP is sitting in that parking lot questioning everything. Every session, every breakthrough, every moment she thought she was healing. And this story is just getting started. So after that parking lot breakdown, OP doesn't sleep. She stays up, replaying 2 years of sessions in her head. And that's when things start clicking in a way she really wishes they wouldn't. I couldn't stop going back through every session in my head. 2 years of appointments. And once I started looking, I couldn't unsee it. There was this thing my mom used to say when it rained. She'd call them gray soup days. My therapist said that exact phrase maybe 6 months in. I remember thinking, oh, that's cute, but not really registering it. Then there was the way she described my anxiety back to me once. She called it the bees behind your eyes. That was my mother's phrase, word for word. My mom made it up when I was maybe 9 because I couldn't explain what panic felt like, and she said it sounds like bees behind your eyes, buzzing so loud you can't see straight. I never told anyone that. I went into my next session ready. My hands were shaking, but I asked her directly, "Where did you hear that phrase, the bees behind your eyes?" She tilted her head and gave me this warm smile like I was a child asking something silly. She said she didn't know what I was talking about, that maybe I'd mentioned it in an earlier session and just forgot. I know I didn't. I know that. She changed the subject to what she called my pattern of hypervigilance and spent the rest of the hour gently suggesting I was spiraling because of unprocessed grief. I left feeling like I was the problem. I told my husband that night, and he held my hand and said, maybe she's right. Maybe you're reading into things because you miss your mom. He wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. But I have never felt more alone. And this is the part that's so hard to watch from the outside. Because she's not wrong. She knows what she heard. But every single person around her is telling her she's grieving too hard. And that kind of doubt is absolutely corrosive. She's caught between trusting her own memory and trusting the person she's been paying to help her heal. And that tension is about to snap. Then came the session that finally broke her. She used another one. Right in the middle of talking about my sleep issues as a kid, she leaned back and said, "The kitchen light is the last one you turn off when you're brave enough to sleep." I stopped breathing. My mother said that to me every single night when I was 7 and terrified of the dark. It was our ritual. I never told a soul about it. Not my husband, not my best friend, nobody. I ended the session right there, walked out mid-sentence. I spent the next 2 weeks tearing her apart online. Her credentials, her license history, old Facebook posts, LinkedIn, alumni directories. I cross-referenced every city she ever lived in with every city my mom lived in. Nothing. Not a single overlap. No mutual friends. No shared workplaces. No connection at all. And that is when I started wondering if maybe I really was losing it. Maybe grief was rewriting my memories. Maybe she said something close enough and my brain filled in the rest. I didn't know anymore. So I made this post. I laid everything out because I needed someone, anyone, to tell me whether I was crazy or whether this was real. The comments came in fast and opinions were split. This is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read on here. She essentially body-snatched your mom's voice and fed it back to you in a setting where you were completely vulnerable. I am so sorry. I physically cannot imagine sitting across from someone I trust and hearing my dead parents' exact words come out of their mouth. That would break something in me permanently. I need to know how she got that hospice phrase. You said you never told anyone. Were there nurses in the room? Could she have contacted the hospice staff? There was one nurse and my aunt. My aunt swears she never spoke to anyone about that night. But my mom kept journals, like obsessively, and I found out after the update that the therapist had at least 3 of them. My mom might have written it down. She wrote everything down. The idea that this woman has been reading my mother's private thoughts about me and then performing them back to me in session makes me physically ill. That reply changed the entire direction of this story. 2 weeks later, OP comes back with an update post. And this is where it gets genuinely disturbing. I found my mother's journals in my therapist's office, and I can't stop shaking. So I took your advice and started digging. I went to my aunt's house to go through old photo albums. And there it was, a picture of my mom in her 20s, arm around another woman at some kind of garden party. I almost missed it, but something about her face stopped me. It was my therapist. Decades younger, different last name, but it was her. My aunt confirmed they were close friends who had some kind of bitter falling out years before I was born. Nobody in the family knew they had reconnected. I felt sick, but I wasn't done. I booked what I planned to be my last session. A confrontation. I got there early and she wasn't in the waiting room yet. There was a notebook on the side table, just sitting there, like she'd forgotten it. I opened it. Pages and pages of my mother's handwriting, transcribed diary entries, her private thoughts, her words about me, about our family. And in the margins, written in my therapist's hand, were my session dates. Notes like, use in session 34, and save for grief milestone. She requested me as a client on purpose. She got my mother's journals after she died. Every single thing she ever said to me that made me feel close to my mom again. None of it was real. It was all scripted. I can't stop shaking. The comment section on this update was a different energy entirely. The fact that she smiled when you confronted her is what's making my skin crawl. She wanted you to notice eventually. This was never about helping you. Therapist here. What you're describing is so far beyond an ethical violation that I genuinely don't have a professional framework for it. Please report her to your state board immediately. Seconding this hard. I'm a social worker, and this isn't just malpractice, this is predatory behavior with a grief-vulnerable client. The fact that she specifically requested OP as a client means this was premeditated. The board needs to know yesterday. And that last detail, that she specifically requested OP, 27-year-old female, as a client, that is what made this thread go from unsettling to unforgivable. A few days later, Quiet Glass added one final edit to the post, and then wiped her account entirely. And then she was gone. But the thread kept going. You need to check if she has recordings of your sessions. If she's this obsessed, she's keeping everything. Get a lawyer before the licensing board. She didn't just betray your trust, she wore your mother like a mask. This is proof you can never fully know someone's motives, not even in the spaces that are designed to be the safest ones we have. Therapy is supposed to be the one room where you can take everything off. Every wall, every guard. You sit there and hand someone the most fragile parts of yourself because the whole point is that it's safe. And what happens when that room becomes the weapon? We still don't know what drove that therapist. Guilt, obsession, some unresolved feeling about OP's mother she couldn't let go of? OP may never get that answer. But the next story is just as unsettling. Let's get into it. I, 27-year-old female, went back to my childhood home and found the spot under the hedges where someone used to leave me food. I don't think it was kindness. All right, this next one messed me up. I need you to sit with this one because it does not go where you think it does. OP is 27, female, grew up in a house where the fridge was empty more often than not. Parents pulling doubles, sometimes just gone. No one checking on her. Nobody making sure she ate. I grew up hungry. That is the simplest way I can put it. My parents worked double shifts or just didn't come home, and nobody was making sure I ate. Between 5 and 9 years old, I found this hollowed-out space under the thick hedgerow between our backyard and the neighbor's property. It was like a little cave in the roots and branches, and someone started leaving food there for me. Sandwiches wrapped in cling film, juice boxes, granola bars, almost every single day. I never saw who did it. I never told a soul. It was mine. It was the one thing in my life that made me feel like somebody out there actually gave a damn about me. Fast forward to now. Both my parents are dead. The house sold in probate, and I went back one last time before closing to walk the property. The hedge hollow was mostly still there. I started clearing it out just for the memory of it, and my hand hit something hard in the dirt. It was a small, weathered plastic bin buried right beneath where I used to sit. I opened it. Inside were dozens of Polaroids of me as a child, eating the food, sleeping curled up in the hedge, playing in the backyard, all from the same low, fixed angle. I stood there, staring at them, and then I looked up and I saw it. The crawlspace vent on the neighbor's house, maybe 4 feet from the hedgerow. The angle matched perfectly. She stops there for a second. When she picks back up, she says she was on her knees in the dirt, hands shaking, nails caked in soil, holding a Polaroid of herself at maybe 6 years old, curled up asleep. And that is where this one opens. So she's kneeling in the dirt with this weathered plastic box in her lap. And instead of running, she does what a lot of people do when something breaks inside them quietly. She sits down and starts flipping through them one by one. The photos were organized, not just tossed in. They were stacked in order. Some had dates penciled on the white strip at the bottom. They spanned years. Some were normal, I guess. Me drawing with chalk on the patio. Me sitting cross-legged in the grass, pulling dandelions apart. But then there were others, taken at dusk. One was my silhouette through my bedroom window, and the angle was wrong. It wasn't from the hedge side. It was from somewhere else entirely, like across the street or from the side yard. That's when I started thinking about the neighbor, Mr. Harrigan. Quiet guy, widower, retired early. Everyone on the street thought he was the sweetest man alive. Mowed his lawn in perfect straight lines, waved at my parents when they bothered to come outside, kept to himself. I remember him giving me a popsicle over the fence once when I was maybe 6 and my mom didn't even look up. I sat in my car outside the house for an hour after finding those photos, called my therapist from the driver's seat with dirt still under my nails. She told me, "Do not go to that man's house. Do not confront anyone. Come in tomorrow and we will process this together." But I can't process it. The memory is curdling in real time. I can feel the little girl version of me trusting that food, grateful for it. And I can feel my adult self understanding exactly what that trust was being shaped into. I'm posting here because I cannot say any of this out loud to anyone yet. That last line is the one that stuck with people. Not anger, not even fear yet. Just this slow motion collapse of a story she had been telling herself for 20 years. The food under the hedge was love. That was the version she survived on. And now she is watching it curdle from the front seat of her car. The post sat quiet for a few hours, then it started to spread. This post hit the front page of the sub overnight. The comment section did not hold back. This is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read on here. The fact that you thought someone was being kind to you, and it was actually a man documenting you from his crawl space. I'm so sorry. I used to have a hiding spot as a kid too, and this post just made me rethink everything about it. Not every situation is the same, but God, this is haunting. The part where you said you used to feel grateful to whoever was leaving the food, that line broke me. You were a hungry little kid, and he exploited that. I was grateful for years, into adulthood. I used to tell my college roommate this sweet story about how someone in my neighborhood secretly took care of me. I told it like it was heartwarming. She probably still remembers me telling it that way. Now I have to live with knowing what it actually was, and that I spent 20 years being thankful to the person who was doing that to me. Then OP starts answering questions deeper in the thread. A few people asked if I've gone to the police yet. I haven't. I'm terrified of what else is going to come out of this. I keep telling myself I'll call tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes, and I just sit there. Some more context since people are asking. The food stopped when I was about 9. That was when my family moved across town. I never questioned why it stopped. I was just sad about it, like I'd lost something. Now I realize the only thing that changed was he lost his access point. We moved, and there was no more hedge, and no more me showing up every day like clockwork. I looked up the property records for his house. I have his full name now. He died in 2019. The house was sold shortly after by his adult daughter. I'm trying to track her down. I don't know what I'm going to say to her. I don't even know what I'm looking for. I just know I can't stop. And then the thread goes silent. 6 days, no updates, nothing. Then the update dropped. 6 days of radio silence, and OP finally came back with a new post. I got the police file, and there were more photos than what I found. I found his daughter through a public obituary guest book. It took me 3 days of scrolling condolence messages before I matched a name. I called her. She was guarded at first, polite but careful, like she had been expecting this call for a while now. Then I told her about the hedge, the food, the Polaroids. She went very quiet. When she finally spoke, she told me that when her father died in 2019 and she was clearing his estate, she found a locked room in the basement. She called the police. She would not tell me exactly what was inside, only that it involved materials about neighborhood children, and that the investigation was closed because he was already deceased and there were no living complainants at the time. She was crying. She kept saying she was sorry, that she had no idea while he was alive. I just sat there holding the phone, because that is when everything clicked. The food was never kindness. It was conditioning. He was keeping a neglected, hungry child coming back to the exact same spot where he had a clear, unobstructed line of sight from his crawlspace vent. I was not being fed. I was being trained to return. And I am about to find out if I was the only one. That realization rearranged everything. And the comment section felt the weight of it immediately. The food was bait. He was literally baiting you like an animal to a feeding station so he could photograph you. I feel physically ill reading this. The Polaroids being taken from a crawlspace vent angle is so calculated. This wasn't impulsive. He set up infrastructure to watch you. That takes planning and intent. Exactly this. People imagine predators as impulsive or chaotic, but the most dangerous ones are methodical. Feeding a neglected child on a schedule so she returns to a fixed location with a pre-positioned camera angle, that's operational thinking. This man planned this like a project. Were there other kids on that street who could have been affected too? I am about to find out. And that is where the update ends, with OP staring down an answer she already knows. And then OP came back one final time. I got the police file, and there were more photos than what I found. I filed a records request with local PD last week. I didn't expect to hear back quickly, but I figured I had to try. For days, nothing. Then a detective called me, not with the documents I asked for, but to ask if I'd be willing to come in and give a formal statement. My inquiry had resurfaced the 2019 file from when his daughter first reported what she found in that basement. They closed the case because he was already dead and there were no living complainants willing to come forward. Now there was one. Me. Then he told me something I was not ready for. There were 2 other girls from my street in those materials. He couldn't share their names, but he confirmed one of them was around my age. I keep thinking about who she was, if she sat next to me in class, if she found food hidden somewhere too. My therapist says the entire pattern is textbook predatory grooming. The isolation of a neglected child, the secret routine, the reward cycle, the hidden observation. She said the food was never kindness, it was infrastructure. I need to say this last thing because I need it out of my body. I can't eat certain foods anymore. Strawberry jam sandwiches, apple juice boxes, those little packs of animal crackers. The smell makes me gag now. I used to think those were the taste of someone loving me. I don't know what they taste like anymore. Her account went dark right after that. The post just sat there. But before she disappeared, one comment had already come through. Please contact the police even though he's dead. If his daughter found a locked room with materials about neighborhood children, there might be other victims who deserve to know. There is no clean ending to this one. No arrest, no courtroom, no confrontation that ties it all together. Just a 27-year-old woman sitting with Polaroids of a childhood she now has to completely relearn. And 3 foods she will never be able to eat again without her body rejecting them. Let that sit for a second. The next story also came out of nowhere, but from a completely different direction. My Alexa has been answering questions I never asked, and last night it used my name in a sentence I never programmed. 28-year-old female. This one genuinely made my skin crawl, and I don't say that lightly. This is from r/Let's Not Meet, posted about 6 days ago by a user called Glasswater28. OP is a 28-year-old woman living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. She works from home, keeps to herself mostly. About 6 months ago, a coworker gave her an Echo Dot as a birthday gift. She uses it for timers, music, checking the weather. Nothing weird, just background noise for a quiet life. Then, about 2 months in, things start to shift. About 2 months after I got it, I woke up one morning and noticed the light ring was spinning blue, like it had just finished responding to something, but I had been asleep. I figured maybe it picked up noise from the TV or a car outside, and I moved on with my day. A few days later it happened again, except this time I actually caught the tail end of it mid-sentence. Something about, your schedule for tomorrow. I never asked that. I don't even use the scheduling feature. It was weird, but I told myself it was just a glitch. Maybe a firmware update gone wrong. Maybe it heard something from a neighbor's apartment through the wall. Then, 3 weeks ago, I jolted awake at 3 a.m. My room was completely dark and silent except for one thing. The Alexa voice, totally calm and clear, like it was reading me a bedtime story. Good night, Ellie. My name is not Ellie. That is a nickname my ex-boyfriend used to call me during our relationship. He was the only person who ever called me that. I never told anyone about it. I never typed it into any device. I never said it out loud in that apartment. I just lay there staring at the blue ring glowing in the dark, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I imagined it. I didn't imagine it. She is lying in the dark at 3 a.m., fully awake now, staring at a device that just called her by a name only one person in her life has ever used. A person she hasn't spoken to in over a year. And that is just the beginning of this story. She's still rattled from the Goodnight Ellie incident, a name no one should know, coming from a device she bought for setting kitchen timers. So she does what feels rational, full troubleshooting mode. I checked my Alexa app history that morning. The Goodnight Ellie command? Not there. No log of any interaction from that night. Nothing. I factory reset the device, changed every password I could think of. For 3 days, silence. I started to relax, told myself firmware glitch, corrupted update, whatever. Then, day 4, I'm in bed around midnight, and she speaks. You were on the phone for 42 minutes tonight. I checked my call log the next morning. 42 minutes exactly. Next night, you should get more sleep. You sound tired. I called Amazon support, got bounced around until a senior tech ran full diagnostics on my account. No third-party skills, no drop-in enabled, no household members linked, nothing to explain it. He called it a hardware defect and sent a free replacement. New device, set it up, and within 48 hours it started again. Same voice, same impossible details about my life. So I started unplugging it at night. Then one night I woke up to it mid-sentence and I know I unplugged it. Walked over and the cord was in the wall. Did I forget? I don't forget things like that. But that is exactly what he used to say. You're remembering it wrong, Ellie. You always do this. Every night now, I just lie in the dark and wait. I don't even know what's worse anymore, when it speaks or when it's quiet. Because when it's quiet, I'm just lying there bracing for it to start. That's what makes this one hit differently than your average creepy smart speaker post. She's past the point of troubleshooting. What's eating at her now isn't the device. It's the feeling that she can't trust her own memory. And the cruelest part is, someone already spent years training her to doubt herself in exactly that way. The speaker isn't just scaring her, it's reopening something she thought she'd started to heal. This is where the story shifts from unsettling to something way more deliberate. I told my friend Marcus about everything. He works in cybersecurity, and the second I finished talking, he went completely quiet. Then he said, "Don't unplug anything. Don't reset anything." He wanted to monitor my network traffic and catch whatever was happening in real time. I hated it, but I agreed. Things kept getting worse. One night around 1 a.m., the Alexa started playing a song. This specific song my ex used to blast on repeat during fights. I hadn't heard it in over a year, and suddenly it's filling my dark apartment at full volume. 2 nights later, I come home from therapy, and before I even sit down, Alexa says, "Did your session with Dr. Ramos go well tonight?" Dr. Ramos, my therapist's first name. I never said that name out loud in my apartment. I started staying at Marcus's place some nights, but the paranoia followed me everywhere. Every smart device lighting up made my chest tight. My ex was arrested once before for showing up at another ex's workplace. Charges got dropped. I haven't heard from him in over a year, and that silence doesn't feel like moving on anymore. It feels calculated. Last night Marcus called, and his voice was different. Flat. Serious. He found something on my network, and I needed to come over right now. He wouldn't say what over the phone. The comments were not holding back on this one. The fact that he was listening to your therapy sessions makes my skin crawl. That's not just stalking, that's someone trying to stay inside your head. Honey, I am so sorry. You survived him once, and you're surviving him again. You are so much stronger than he wants you to believe. CyberSec professional here. The spoofed local API trick is well documented but rarely seen in domestic stalking cases. This person had real technical knowledge or hired someone who did. Either way, please get law enforcement involved immediately. He was a network engineer. That's actually how we met. He set up my entire home network when I moved into my old place 3 years ago. He configured the router, the Echo, everything. My friend who looked at my setup said he basically left himself a back door the entire time we were together. I just never knew because I trusted him completely. Law enforcement is involved now, but I keep thinking about every single conversation I had in that apartment. OP went silent after that. 2 full weeks. Nothing. Then she came back with an update post. They traced the IP, and I know who it was. I'm writing this from my friend's apartment. I'm writing this from my friend Marcus's couch, and I haven't been back to my apartment in 9 days. I'm sorry I disappeared, but I needed to wait until I had something concrete. Marcus examined my router and found an unauthorized device connected to my home Wi-Fi for over 4 months, weeks before I even got the Echo. Someone had been on my network since before any of this started. What they were doing was spoofing local API calls to my smart speaker, basically impersonating the Alexa service from inside my own network. That is how the commands never showed up in my app history. That is how a brand new replacement did the same thing within 48 hours. It was never the device, it was my network. But here is the part that broke me. They had been silently activating the Echo's microphone during specific windows, mostly between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., routing the recorded audio to an external server. When I cross-referenced the timestamps with my phone records, they matched perfectly. Every single activation lined up with the nights I had late sessions with my therapist. Every conversation where I talked about him, about what he did to me, about how I was finally starting to heal. Someone was listening to all of it in real time. Marcus traced partial IP logs. I know who it is. I am not saying the name yet because of legal proceedings, but if you have been reading this, you already know. The comments on this update were ruthless. I had to put my phone down after reading the part about the nickname. The idea that he's been sitting somewhere listening to you sleep for 4 months is genuinely one of the most disturbing things I've read on here. 4 months is what the logs show. If he had access from the beginning, from when he set up her network, it could be way longer than that. The logs only go back so far. That's the part that's keeping me up tonight. Please tell me you've unplugged every single one of those devices. Not just turned off, physically unplugged and removed from your home. OP came back one final time with an update post. They traced the IP, and I know who it was. I'm writing this from my friend's apartment. The IP logs my friend pulled, combined with additional digital forensics the police ran, were enough. They identified him. My ex-boyfriend. He was arrested 2 days ago and charged with unauthorized computer access and stalking. A restraining order has been filed. I have moved to a new apartment, and I have shared my address with exactly 4 people. There are no smart speakers here, no voice assistants, no IoT devices of any kind. I am writing this update from a friend's phone because I have disconnected every device in my home that has a microphone, including my own phone most of the time. I know that sounds extreme. I know people will say I am letting him win by living like this, but you do not get to tell me what safe feels like. The hardest part is not that he surveilled me. It is not even that he listened. It is knowing that the moments I thought were most private, lying in bed at 3 a.m. whispering to my therapist about how I was finally starting to feel safe, those were the exact moments he chose to tune in. He listened to me heal from him. I do not know how to make peace with that yet, but I am trying. 4 months of silent access. That is what stays with me. Not the tech, the patience. This story reframes every smart home device as a potential vector for intimate control. Abusers adapt to new technology. And the scariest part is how quietly they can operate when they decide to. The comments on this last post hit different. This is why I will never own a smart speaker. People laugh at me for it, but stories like this validate every paranoid thought I've ever had. Healing from abuse means nothing if the abuser never actually left. He was in her walls the whole time. Not physically, but digitally. Same difference. That invisible intrusion, someone sitting in your most vulnerable moments and you had no idea. That is what makes this story stay with you long after you close the tab. But that is not the only story that kept me up this week. My neighbor used to reach over our 10-foot fence to hand me food when I was little. She was standing on flat ground. This one was posted to r/nosleep 3 days ago by Fence Post Kid, 26-year-old male, and it starts quiet before it gets under your skin. OP opens by saying they're writing this as an adult, trying to make sense of something from childhood that never sat right. I grew up on a rural property about 40 minutes outside of town. Nearest neighbors were a half-mile in either direction, except for one lot directly behind ours. My dad built a privacy fence along that back border when I was maybe 4 or 5. Not a normal fence, 10 feet tall, solid wood, no gaps. He sank the posts in concrete and added extra boards anytime he thought the wind had loosened something. He never told me why, just said, "Stay away from the fence." But I was a lonely kid with no siblings and too much yard, so I played back there anyway. That is where I first heard her. A woman's voice, soft, kind, coming from the other side. She never told me her name. I never saw her face. She would just talk to me through the wood, ask me how my day was, tell me I was a good kid. And then, one afternoon, she said she had something for me. I heard her stand up on the other side, and then an arm came over the top of that 10-foot fence. A long, pale arm. The hand had too many knuckles. The fingers bent in directions fingers should not bend. She placed a small, reddish fruit into my open palm, and I ate it. It tasted sweet and warm like it had been sitting in sunlight. I ate everything she ever gave me after that without a single question. I was maybe 5 years old. I did not understand what was wrong with any of this until I was 26 and standing next to an actual 10-foot fence at a construction site. I looked up at the top and my whole body went cold. There is no ladder in the world that explains what I remember. And that is where part 1 leaves you. A kid alone in a yard, a voice with no face, and an arm that had no business reaching where it reached. OP is just getting started. So the feeding wasn't a one-time thing. It became a routine. It started with cookies, chocolate chip, the soft kind, still warm. Apple slices, cut thin and fanned out in her palm like she'd arranged them just for me. I remember thinking she was the nicest person in the whole world. Every day after school, I'd drop my backpack on the porch and go straight to the fence. She was always already there. I never had to wait. Her voice was so gentle, like she was singing without a melody. "Here, sweetheart, I made this just for you. Eat up." And I did, every single time. But the food changed, slowly at first. Fruits I'd never seen before, dark purple, almost black, with skin that split open when you squeezed, and something warm inside that tasted like nothing I can compare to anything since. Then meat, little strips of it, still hot, almost wet. I didn't ask what it was. I just ate it because she told me to, and her voice made everything feel safe. My dad started losing it around this time. He added 2 more feet to the fence. Then he nailed boards over every gap and knothole. He never told me why. He'd just catch me near the fence and drag me inside by the arm, face red, jaw tight. One time he caught me mid-bite, something she'd handed me, reddish, I don't even know what it was, and he didn't yell at me. He turned toward the fence and screamed, full volume, shaking, and then he just crumbled. Fell to his knees, sobbing with his hands pressed flat against the wood. Everything went quiet on the other side. Then I heard her laugh, soft and low, like she found something tender about watching him break. The feeding didn't stop after that. I just got better at hiding it. The part that sits wrong with me is the laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, tender. Like whatever was on the other side of that fence genuinely enjoyed watching a grown man fall apart over something he couldn't control. And OP, a little kid, just kept going back. Because the voice told them to. Because it felt safe. This is where OP's story shifts. The feeding stops, but what it left behind doesn't. When I was 12, my dad sold the house. No warning, no discussion. One week I was playing in the yard, and the next we were loading boxes into a U-Haul headed 6 hours east. He never mentioned the neighbor again. Not once. He stopped talking about a lot of things, actually. Started drinking heavy. Would sit on the back porch of our new place just staring at the tree line like he was waiting for something to step out of it. I told myself the fence thing was just a weird neighbor on a ladder. That's the story I built in my head because the alternative didn't make sense. But here's the thing I couldn't explain away. After we moved, I stopped being hungry. Not like I lost my appetite, I still ate. But it was mechanical, like going through the motions. Nothing tasted right. Nothing tasted like those fruits. Every meal since I was 12 has felt like a pale imitation of something I can't name, and it scares me that I still miss it. The comments on this one went exactly where you'd expect. The detail about the fingers bending the wrong way made me physically recoil. Whatever that thing was, it understood enough about humans to mimic feeding a child. That's what makes it horrifying. Your father knew. He absolutely knew. And the fact that his note says, "I'm sorry I couldn't stop you," means he watched you go to that fence every single day and couldn't do anything about it. That's devastating. Has anyone else noticed OP said, "strange fruits"? What fruits? Were they even real fruits? Because if something non-human was hand-making food for a child, that opens a whole different door. I've been trying to remember, and honestly, they didn't look like anything I've seen since. They were dark, almost black, and warm like they'd been held for a long time. They tasted sweet, but in a way that made my teeth ache. I ate them every single day for what I think was 2 or 3 summers. I don't know what I was eating, I really don't. So OP went quiet for a while after that last post. Then, a few days later, they came back with an update. I found my dad's recordings, and now I know why he built the fence. My dad passed last month. Heart attack, alone in his kitchen. I had to drive back out to the property to handle the estate, and I hadn't been there in over 15 years. Going through his things, I found a box of old cassette tapes labeled with dates from when we lived there. The house looked smaller, the way childhood places always do when you go back. But the lot next door, I walked over expecting to see her house. There's nothing there. No house, no foundation, no driveway, no mailbox. Just flat, packed dirt like nothing was ever built on that land. I pulled county records, and that parcel has been listed as vacant since before my family even bought our place. There was never a neighbor. I went back to the fence after that. Dad's side is torn up. Deep claw marks scored into the wood right at the 10-foot line, hundreds of them, like something dragged itself along the top edge over and over. At the base, I found bones. Small ones, birds, mice, rabbits, buried in neat little rows running the entire length of the fence line. Dozens of them, lined up careful like someone was practicing. Now I think I understand why he built it. Practicing. That word just sits wrong. And the comment section picked up on all of it. Your dad built a 10-foot fence and you still took food from whatever was on the other side? Kids are literally fearless and it's terrifying. But this next reply is the one that really got under people's skin. I'm sorry, but the fact that you're now waking up in your backyard facing a fence is not something you should just casually drop at the end. You need to set up cameras immediately. The worst part is, I don't even feel scared when it happens. Standing by that fence at the old property, I just felt calm, almost nostalgic, like I was waiting for something I missed. That terrifies me way more than anything else does. So here is where everything comes together. And honestly, this is the part that sat with me long after I stopped reading. Going through my dad's things after the funeral, I found a Bible in his nightstand. He was never religious. Not once in my life did I see that man pray or step inside a church. But tucked inside the back cover was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and stained with something I don't want to think about. His handwriting. Shaky but unmistakable. It read, "She only wants to feed. Do not let her feed you. Do not go to the fence. I'm sorry I couldn't stop you." I sat on his bedroom floor and just broke. He knew what it was. He always knew, and he couldn't stop it, and he couldn't explain it to a kid who thought the nice lady next door was just sharing snacks. He watched me walk to that fence every day, and all he could do was build it higher. Since I came back from the property, something is wrong with me. I am hungry all the time, but nothing satisfies it. I eat a full meal and feel completely hollow 10 minutes later. This is not normal hunger. It is deep and empty in a way food cannot reach. 3 nights ago, I woke up standing barefoot in my backyard at 3 a.m., facing the fence line at the back of my property. I do not remember getting out of bed. I do not remember opening the door. I was just standing there in the dark, and I could hear something on the other side, breathing, slow and patient like it has been waiting this whole time. The comment section on this one was shaken. The neat rows of animal bones is what gets me. It was practicing on animals before it moved to you. Or it was leaving them as gifts. Either way, I hate it. And that right there is what makes this one linger. It is not about the creature or whatever was on the other side of that fence. It is about a child who was conditioned to trust something monstrous. OP's father built that fence, reinforced it, moved his whole family across the state, drank himself into silence trying to carry this alone. And none of it mattered because the thing on the other side was never tied to the property. It was tied to OP. And now OP is standing at a new fence in a new city at 3 in the morning. That is the last story for today.